All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to the version 7.1 webinar for MyWorkDrive. We're super excited to get started and show you guys what we have in store for the latest release. So we're going to start this off with a quick introduction of who the presenters are today. That's going to be myself, Rick, who's the VP of Sales, as well as Scott Miller, who's the VP of Engineering. We're all going to do this in portions. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and there's going to be a demo section as well. So essentially what the agenda today is a quick reintroduction of what MyWorkDrive is. Most of you probably already have a good idea of what this is, but we're just going to, for our new viewers, do a quick overview. We're going to talk about what's new in the latest version of the application and follow that up with demos of both the clients as well as the server of MyWorkDrive. We are also going to have a Q&A session right after all of this. So I would like to request you to please hold your questions till the end of the session so that we can address all of the questions at the same time. And please do keep in mind we will be sending out the slide deck as well as the recording of the webinar to all of the attendees and uploading it on our website as well. So let's get started with a quick introduction of what MyWorkDrive is. So MyWorkDrive is essentially an on-prem software solution which enables private cloud functionality for our users. What this essentially means is that people are able to use their existing storage, which is why we like to use the terminology bring your own storage, and essentially enable remote file access to one or many different file shares using the MyWorkDrive server client kind of architecture. So what this essentially enables is a VPN-free way of accessing files, regardless of whether they're stored locally or across a variety of cloud storage systems. It also builds on top of your existing security and control infrastructure, which is what we're going to discuss in this how it works slide. So some of you may already be aware, but MyWorkDrive essentially is broken up into two pieces. There is a server software, which is what you see right in the middle, as well as the client software. To start us off, the server software essentially connects to your existing identity infrastructure as well as file infrastructure. So it connects to whatever file shares you may have, which is what you see on the right-hand side of this slide. This could be anything local, anything you can SMB into, including NAS drives, or a variety of different cloud storage service providers, including but not limited to OneDrive, SharePoint, Azure Blob, Azure Files, as well as S3, which is something new that we've added in this release. In addition to hooking into existing file servers, the MyWorkDrive server also hooks into existing identity providers, so it sits right on top of your Active Directory or Entra ID, which means you don't have to migrate files or users anywhere. Once you have the MyWorkDrive server set up done, you can connect to and access all of your different files using one of our clients. We obviously have a desktop client, which is a mapped drive experience on both Windows and Mac, a web client for all modern web browsers, as well as a mobile client for iOS and Android. So essentially what this architecture facilitates is a VPN-free, very control-centric way of accessing your files, regardless of whether they're locally hosted or cloud hosted. Now, part of the benefits that come with using MyWorkDrive is Office Online collaboration across all files, regardless of where they're stored. Typically, Office Online collaboration is reserved for files that are stored on a OneDrive or a SharePoint, some sort of Microsoft cloud storage. Or, of course, if you're using another provider like an OnlyOffice, one would expect those files to be on OnlyOffice servers. But through the use of the MyWorkDrive server software, you're able to extend that Office Online collaboration across all of your files, even if they are stored locally. What MyWorkDrive essentially facilitates through all of this is a host of different cybersecurity benefits. Since it's an on-prem application, it lends itself very well to a variety of different compliance mechanisms, which we'll go through on the next slide as well. But there are a bunch of other features built into the application, including a lot of control over public link sharing, the ability to connect with multi-factor authentication providers like Duo, data leak prevention features, which allow you to customize the watermark on files and make sure that they're read-only and not downloadable, device approval features that allow you to control which devices are able to access which file shares, as well as, of course, everything being meticulously logged. So the compliance standards that we found ourselves being deployed in are across the board due to the flexibility in deployment in HIPAA compliant systems across hospital networks across the world, FedRAMP for government agencies, GDPR in Europe, and so on. So essentially, MyWorkDrive is a complete private cloud solution which facilitates all of these things in a very compliant and friendly manner. So hopefully that's a quick reintroduction to MyWorkDrive. If you do have any questions, please do use the Q&A section to go ahead and send them in. But with that done, I'm going to hand off to Rick to tell you what's new in 7.1.
There we go. Thank you. Let me go here. Good. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Thank you everyone again for joining. Just to let you know, we have a combination of new first-time viewers, current customers, and other people attending that were waiting for S3. So what I'd like to do with this is I'm gonna show the new things in 7.1, and then from there, actually I think just stop sharing so I can talk about this. Yeah. Can you share that slide?
Yes. Yeah, I'll get it back up, Rick. There you go.
There you go. Thank you. So what's new in 7.1? Management API for shares. This is powerful now that people can, without our interface, use the API to automate creation, configuration, removal of file shares. And then we have the web client bulk file uploader. That's a mouthful for me, but the new uploader adds the ability to handle large files, bulk transfer. It's kind of fun to show that, and I will. Name search. So we've got a really nice, quick name search. Just using simple name search, you don't have to use things like DT search, things like that. And then lastly is support for SFTP and S3 storage. And as I mentioned, that S3 storage highly asked for. So we'll be showing that as well. Okay, now we'll go back here. And yes, any questions on what I'm showing here again is at the end we'll answer all of those. So I'm going to go in and first show you the highlights of what's new, and then just for the new people show the key features. We'll go from there. So let's start here. I always like to start with our web client. We do have the web client, the MapDrive client, and mobile, and we also have for Mac as well, which is the equivalent of the MapDrive client and web. So here we are. First screen is this. I always change before demos to whatever the logo might be for the company. In this case, it's our default logo, but just letting everyone know that's customizable. So you can do that. It flows through to all of our clients. So I'm logging in here with in this case, my shares are SMB shares, and we use AD. So I'm logging in with my credentials. Now, if you're using single sign-on, we certainly leverage that and honor that, so people would just flow through. It's a question I always get, and the answer is yes. I just have it turned on so I can talk about that screen. I should say turned off. Now, this window right here, you can turn it off. It says, hey, there's some DLP going on here, data leak prevention, and I'll lightly touch on that. That is something you can absolutely hide. I just leave it on, again, for demos. So here's everything I can see. Notice we have OneDrive and SharePoint. I won't go into those, but just suffice we have a single pane of glass interface into those that typically you would access outside of MyWorkDrive, but we've made it easy to get at all of that through MyWorkDrive. So might as well start with the new stuff right away. I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to go to, I'll just pick forms, and we'll go inside here. Now what I'd like to do is upload, and I'm going to upload a folder. So this, I'll just find one in, let's say, my downloads. There it is. I'm going to double click on that, or single click, I should say, and upload it. Here's the new feature, show the details. So you can see all that. It's really fun to do it. So it's become part of my favorite thing to demo. So there you go. So that's uploading an entire folder very quickly. That is definitely a new feature in 7.1. Another one is, let me just go here and search. Let me look for the word executive. Just hit enter here. There you go. Nice quick search. Looks at all the file names and pulls up what you need for whatever particular share that you're in. So now let's just go back. We'll just go back here and I'll pick a document that I want to work with. And now we're kind of back, not kind of, we're definitely back to what would be just a typical demo, but I'm going to breeze through because I have to leave time for others to do their part of the presentation. So I'm just going to single click here. Notice the ribbon, it's dynamic depending on what my capabilities are for the share. If I'm read-only, some of this ribbon is going to go away. So that'll change over time on what you're doing and what your permissions are. So I'm going to double click. So we're heavily integrated with Office 365 Online and Office 365 Online local server, depending. And here's the document. So you do need to have an Office 365 license, not to view it, but if you wanted to edit it. And so you'd have to have a license, but let's say, well, it'd be kind of clumsy, but I usually say, everybody on the call, they'd see a little toast here. Rick is here, Tom is there, Dan is here, whatever. So you get the idea. So it's truly Office 365. And it behaves exactly as you would expect. And let me just get this out of the way. That thing's always in the way on me when we do a demonstration. It's gone now. Okay, and so I can just close this. And no, so we make the changes. We're done. If we're collaborating, every change gets written out, so there's no conscious effort needed to save that out. I always like to say at this time, MyWorkDrive is access to your remote access to your shares where they exist. We are not a sync and share by design, so you're always working on, I always say, the gold copy or the pristine copy. So that's why changes are automatically written back and don't have to be synced back. As I went here, you see that we have a built-in viewer. This is my I'm actually a scuba diver and I'm 70 feet down, and as you can see the screen, I'm accessing my WorkDrive. So if you there we go. So so we have the built-in viewer, right? We can do all of these things. So we covered that. And let's see, what else can I show you here before I go to the map drive? Let's go, I'm going to hit DLP very quickly and go to here. So here's that market definition doc. But in this case, notice what happens. I have DLP on this share. And DLP can be applied on shares, on groups, on users, and things like that. And it's designed really to look but don't touch on intellectual property, very sensitive type documents. Now's a good time that I can talk about logging. Everything that gets done within my WorkDrive is logged, and Scott will talk about more of that in the admin panel. But here, I forgot to change this from my last demo. This is but I'm glad I did, because it's very customizable as well. So it's internal use, all of that. I can't copy, I can't paste, I can't email it out. So again, it's look but don't touch. And this is why we're compliant with everything, because of the way we can show things, but not allow them to be saved and go from there. Let me just touch something else here that is something that, again, we've had it for a while, but it's very useful for people. If I right-click here and I go to share, I can share this, of course, internally within the organization, but I can share it publicly. And this is for people, I get these questions all the time. Can we share with people not in our identity provider, Active Directory or Enter or whatever? And the answer is yes, you can do it with our file and folder sharing, and this is set up by the admin on how many days you could let this be allowed, when it could, but you can, once this is set up inside by the admin, then the user can choose the number of days, when it expires, put a password on it if you want even more security, and then you just copy this. Well, this link then would go into an email, and then that whether it's a folder or a file, the user, when they click on that link, it'll take them to the browser and they can see everything in that share. I like to call that, quick and easy, and it's really the sharing that most people use, but we do have something called guest user sharing, which involves more granular type of permissions, as if that person is in the company accessing a share like everybody else. And Scott will probably touch on that a bit on how that works. And it leverages Microsoft's B2B functionality. I pretty much think now I've covered everything in the web client. So let me just put that away. And I'm going to go here now, and we'll talk about the MyWorkDrive client. Here's the CE. This would be pre-MyWorkDrive, as I like to say. So as a client machine, I don't know what those shares are. And here's where we introduce the client, MyWorkDrive client, similar for the Mac, as we said. So same kind of functionality. Notice I have this turned off. Map at startup. If I had it turned on when I accessed my machine here, I would not have seen anything. I have it turned off for demos, but in real life every day when I turn my my laptop on here at home, I don't get this because I'm single sign-on in, if that's a word, and then it just flows in. But I have it here so I can talk about it. Access to my MyWorkDrive is always through the HTTPS URL. And it's going to use, in this case, my NT credentials. But again, when I do it, and most people have it, the question I get is, do they have to log in every time? No, it's just now for the demo purposes because I have it map it started. So I do this. So assume I just turn the machine on. I don't see this. Boom. So when I go here in my everyday functionality, here it is. All of these, the user doesn't know, doesn't really care where these are. It's a map drive, right? They have access just like everything else. I didn't talk about S3 you probably saw it on the web client, but here it is as well. So this is new functionality of S3 connectivity, if you wanted to call it, or showing S3 buckets, I believe is the word. So it's here. It was in the map drive as well. So that's new functionality. I can double click on it. There it is. That's coming from S3. Again, as the user, I don't really care. Here's my demo share that I had earlier. Now, if I double click on this, it's going to open up right in local Office, local Word. Same with all of the other Office, Excel and PowerPoint would do that. And the other part is when I click on a PDF, well, it's going to open up in that. I can also choose because it's a map drive, you can do things like open with, open in, whatever. And if I had, I've got full-blown Acrobat, so I can choose how to do that. So it functions as a regular map drive. Now, some cool things about this over and above. Let me just click on this any document. I can just do this one. I click here. I can go MyWorkDrive. I don't have public and private internal file sharing on file and folder. I just don't have it turned on here for the map drive, but if I did, it would be here. But so I could talk about these two with the bulk upload. We also have open in co-edit mode, which is really outside of what you can normally do with map drives and Office type documents, where 2, 3, however many people could open this Word document in co-edit mode. It would launch in the browser, and you'd be able to be in co-edit mode like I showed you earlier in the web client. That's a nice feature to have in here, as well as that public and file and folder sharing. What else do we have here? I always like to go, maybe move this over. I'll take this. I can do this. Notice that's just normal functionality, but we have an allow list and a block list, or leave it the gates wide open, where you can say, I just wanted these shares, our typical files, Word, Office documents, PDFs, JPEGs, whatever. So you can say that's the allow list. Block list could be things like EXEs, things that don't make sense for that. Or again, in my case, it's wide open. I think that, one more. When you install the client, you can tell the client, hey, I don't have local office, so I need what I want to use a map drive to access these shares. So what it would do is launch all of your Office documents in Office 365 online. So that's another neat feature that we have. And I didn't mention in the web client, we have kind of the reverse of that. You can have the web client access but not have Office 365 online and choose to open it in the local app. So we've got customers who do both of those or either or. So that's nice functionality to have. And again, here's that SharePoint, here's OneDrive, and here's the S3 share. So I think I highlighted pretty much everything. And I just want to talk about, I don't have for demos. It's very interesting. People say, do you have a mobile app? Say, oh, absolutely. We have actually two methods of access via mobile. One is just with the browser. Use Safari if it's an iPad, or Windows if it's a tablet, whatever. So you can access it that way, and it's just like you saw when I did the web client. But we also have a nice app that it'll honor all of the security. You can double click on a Word document, you can open it up and edit it, and it's very nice. Most customers say, do you have that app? And I say, yes. Is there an application for that? They go, no, but we might have it in the future. So I don't typically show it unless people say, hey, yeah, we'd really like to see that. I did have one case where it was exclusively mobile and we spent time on that, but rest assured that we have that. And if anybody wants a full-blown demo afterwards, you can see the slide where you can schedule with me and we can do that. And the demo would be much more customizable to what you're looking for. As this being a generic demo, we'll use this particular demo in our what do we call it? Anytime webinar for people in the future. That's kind of why I wanted to cover all of this from both the new stuff and the old stuff. So I'm pretty much done. I'm going to hand this off to Scott to do the server side of things and go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. So I'm going to carry on with Rick's theme. I'm going to give you a relatively high-level overview of the administrative side of our product. I'm going to touch maybe on 10% of the things that are in here. So, those of you who are familiar with the product, this is all going to look very familiar. There's relatively small changes. Those of you who've never seen it before, this will not be in-depth enough for you to get going, but rest assured that our support website has guides and articles for all of these things. So if you need this or you want to watch a video in detail, our support site, our server setup guide, those things exist. Resources all exist. And of course, we're going to do a Q&A, so certainly feel free to ask questions. We'll get to those at the end. And you can also reach out to us. We'll talk about that here in a minute. I want to touch on two things from Rick's client presentation briefly that aren't really anything to show on the server admin side. The first is talked a lot about the client and setting some of the features and those things. Be aware that the client can be installed in a scripted manner, and it can through Intune or through group policy push or whatever your MDM is. So that's all supported, and there's a guide on our website. The website I just had a minute ago and showed you to basically explain how to do that. The other thing to be aware of, and that's unchanged. That's not new in 7.1. Our software's always worked that way. The other thing that is unchanged but important is you saw him using that URL to access both in the web browser and the client. So there's that publishing process, which I'm not going to show you as part of this demo, but you do publish, and I use that term loosely because it doesn't have to be a public endpoint. You don't have to internet expose to MyWorkDrive server. You can do it exclusively internally, but there's that concept of publishing or making the software available to your end users, and that's unchanged. You can do that with our built-in reverse proxy on our Cloud Web Connector. You can do that with a direct connection with a certificate and DNS changes. You can set MyWorkDrive behind proxies and load balancers, or a high availability scenario with a cluster. So all those things are still true. They all work essentially the same way as what they always have. So again, this is all familiar territory for those of you who've seen it before. Our admin panel and our sign-in unchanged relatively in 7.1. My initial sign-in, I've landed on the shares page here. Concept behind MyWorkDrive, Ron mentioned control. MyWorkDrive creates this remote access tool set, but it doesn't automatically publish your entire environment. It's not like a VPN where you sign in and, okay, you can browse to anything as if you were in the office. No, you decide what you make available in this shares world. And you have control within the share of what you make available. Why don't we click on one of these new ones, like our S3 drive? You see here, I have an S3 drive established and set up in here. I have the ability to choose what users I make this available to. In this case, I've just chosen everyone in my directory, but this could be granular, right? And I can go in and edit and actually choose my users or my groups from the directory of who I want to make this available to, what features they get, the ability to turn on and off. Again, it's all about control. Everything you see as I talk through the various menu items here is about keeping you in control of what the users have access to and securing your environment, those compliance elements that Ron showed earlier. Of course, I just mentioned the fact that we have S3 drive, and we also have the ability to do things like manage our locks and our sessions, right? So good interoperability with other infrastructure, the ability to drop in and just be compatible, to have that familiar tool set. And Rick mentioned the fact that there's an API to manage this. I don't have a lot to show that. I'll show you where to get the access information over in the Enterprise tab, but I'm not going to drag you through a Postman or a curl or some programming class to show you how to do that. But you can essentially now manage the ability to create these shares and modify their permissions via the API. Settings tab, again, tons of security features in here to keep you in control. Ron mentioned our Office Online integration. That one's pretty close to the top of the list, right behind publishing, which I mentioned was really important earlier. The ability to basically set these things. You'll see as you enable various options that modify connection window, common attribute in our software to simply expose the configuration values that are in there. And, all these things tie back to integrations, which I'll talk about towards the end, but know that there's multiple entry points to manage these things. Really, the new one that's in here, of course, is that search that Rick mentioned, the ability to use the simple search. Now, new deployments, this is on and set by default. So if you're spinning up a new MyWorkDrive server, you're a new customer, or you're an existing customer setting up a new environment, you will have this on by default. If you're upgrading an existing environment, this setting will retain your existing settings. So if you're currently using Windows Search Service or DT Search, you don't have it on at all, know that you'll have to pop in here and turn this on. Simply pop in here and turn it on and choose Simple Search from the dropdown. As we get on from settings, the Enterprise tab, these are more settings, but they're a bit more of our advanced features. Rick mentioned that data leak prevention. You would see on here guest user access. Rick talked about our B2B integration when you're using Active Directory. My server doesn't have that because I'm in Enter ID mode, so I'm using OAuth and Microsoft natively, so you can do B2B natively just simply in Microsoft. You also don't see the SAML configuration here, which you would on Active Directory, again, because I'm using Microsoft natively with OAuth and don't need to enable SAML to create that SSO experience for my users. The API is here. Enabling this public API endpoint shows your API key. Go ahead and try and use this on my server. Sure. It's in our lab, so you won't have access to it. And this will change. You can enable and disable essentially to reset that. And of course, branding, the tools that you're familiar with, setting logos and colors and such. Device management, I'm pretty sure we touched on. This is for our install clients, so that Mac OS, Windows, iOS, Android, the install clients, and the ability to control whether they have access or not. So if you want them to be approved, if you want to require approval, if a user attempts to access when approval is required and you have not granted them access, they won't be able to sign in. Again, keeping you in control. We're tracking the user. We're tracking what the version is. If you're managing version control, who's signing in, etc. Even if you're not using device approval, we're still collecting this information so you can use it as a tool to manage your environment. You have that visibility around login times and that sort of thing, which is redundant with alerts and logs, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Public sharing. Ron and Rick both touched on the concept of public sharing. The idea behind public sharing in this tab in administration is the ability for you, again, control, security, it's kind of a recurring theme in this conversation that we're having with you today. The ability for you to control the bare minimums or the requirements, right? Your expiration timeframes, the features that users have to follow if they're using this feature, and then anyone who's created any shares, you have the ability to see and manage them if they've done something that you need to remove, or they ask you for help with it, or they ask you to renew it, something to that effect. Of course, this has the ability to be turned on and off entirely. You saw or may have seen, I clicked through it rather quickly. If we edit one of these shares, you'll see the ability also to manage whether a particular user and group can do that at the share level. So a lot of granular control in here. One thing I'll point out is we actually have a Cloudflare S3 integration running in this lab as well. So all those different types of integrations. I don't have SFTP running, but could be an SFTP as well if you're connecting to an SFTP server and then want to share that out to your users via MyWorkDrive. Back to public sharing. There is something missing. Existing customers will notice that we have removed the legacy OneDrive and SharePoint option, OneDrive and Outlook options. Those were good in the early days, good as tools when we were more comfortable with moving files out of the environment. The feedback we've gotten from our user community essentially is we don't use those because we don't want that. And so we've removed that as a legacy item, as Microsoft really doesn't encourage that kind of usage anymore. So existing customers upgrading will notice that those features are moving away. Clustering, there's not a lot to show on this. I didn't necessarily need to click on it, but MyWorkDrive works in multi-node environments. It's absolutely fine to deploy multiple MyWorkDrive servers. There are a number of options of what you want to do as far as clustering, as far as how you deploy your load balancer, how you sync sessions and locks, whether you choose to sync config settings. So I don't want to spend take a bunch of your time today going through that, but understand that MyWorkDrive works in high availability, multi-node scenarios, and there's, it's easy to set up. So we have a really good guide on our website with all the details. Alerts and logs, really, I think of these kind of together, and they speak to a concept which Ron mentioned, which is, keeping track of all of the user activity. Alerting is this email ability to notify you if exceptions happen in basically user activity. Did they download too many files? Did they modify too many files? Did they delete too many files, right? These all have thresholds if you turn them on. And it's an email push, right? As essentially a warning mechanism around, is there aberrant user behavior, or is there potentially something inappropriate going on? Is there something malicious going on? A sync you don't expect, any of those sort of things. Now, most of us, I don't get too much email. I don't want any more email, and that's fine because that same data is collected over here in our logs tab. And this is essentially everything that a user does with a file or folder. You can see the Samantha user created some public share links. Scott deleted some items. We go through here. You'll see other users have done things. Gerard had some operations in here. So all this data is here. You can scroll through it. You can search it. You can export it. So you have that, right? And there's a retention period set on the settings tab. You can adjust the retention period if you need better than default. You can also integrate via Syslog with your SIM. So you can turn this on, pop in your SIM settings, push all this data there, and then get all your alerting from there, right? So maybe you don't need our built-in alerts. That's fine, but you still need that, right? Obviously, running an organization, you need those notifications, that information about what's going on in the environment. So that's logs and alerting. All this data is here for you. 3 more things, and then I promise I'm done. Health dashboard is simply a holistic view of the condition of your MyWorkDrive environment, the server itself, the services that the server needs, and then any connections to other things that it needs. Like in our case, I'm using Cloudflare for connection for Office Online editing, and am I licensed? Do I need a reboot? All that kind of fun stuff. Not something that you would necessarily use day in and day out, but a place we go when there's a problem, right? Our support team will reach out to you and say, well, let's take a look at your dashboard and see what's missing. You may even find that proactively you're looking at the dashboard when you have a problem and able to self-resolve problems like, oh, my server needs a reboot. Okay, let's reboot it and rule that out. It got Windows updates or whatever. And you can see my server was just rebooted yesterday because of Patch Tuesday. Integrations, I mentioned to you that you see these also come up as you're stepping through shares and settings and enterprise and such. The ability to basically manage your connections to the third-party resources like storage in Azure and editing in OnlyOffice or who you're set up for identity providers and whether you have Syslog set up, stuff like that. This is essentially another view you can go to collect that information and manage that information. If, for example, you're staging a blob migration, so you want to set it up in here, but you don't want to deploy it on shares yet, you can get ahead a little bit of those sort of things in an implementation or a migration phase. Last point to me before I'll turn it back to Ron and we can open up to Q&A and questions is essentially the fact that there are a host of support articles out on our website. So if I didn't touch on something that you need to learn about today, or there's something you have curiosity about, why visit our support site, myworkdrive.com/support, or just MyWorkDrive and click the link in the menu. And you can get back to all of our articles and guides. There's hundreds of them out here if you start adding things up. The last point I'll make is if you need personalized help, you have follow-up questions, you have a problem with something, pop over to our help desk. You can send us an email or pop over to the help desk link and start a support case with us. We'll be happy to assist you, answer questions, etc. So let me turn that back to Ron, and we'll get into the wrap-up portion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott and Rick, for those demos. So at this point, I think we're complete with the presentation. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, please go ahead and add them to the chat or the Q&A portion of this webinar, and we'll do our best to address them. To get us started, I have received a question that is about the S3 connectivity. So Scott, this person is asking what S3 sources we support.
Yeah, I actually had the same question come into me, so maybe the same person. S3, so essentially the S3 integration is any S3 compatible storage. Out of the box, there are configurations for the common ones. I showed Cloudflare and S3, but IBM, Backblaze, there's 10 or 15 of them. And there's the ability to create a custom one. So if you're running something that isn't on the list but advertises an S3 compatible API, like NetApp ONTAP is a deployment we went through this week, you could set up really any connection there. And we'll be happy to walk you through that. If you visit the S3 article on our website, it's basically reach out to us because we want to assist you to get that connection set up and running. So that's the process, essentially. If you want to deploy S3, just reach out to the help desk, and we'll get you talked through configuring that in the software.
Awesome. Any more questions that you've received, Scott?
I had a second question come in about publishing, and that's actually why I got that just before the call or just before our presentation. That's why I added a little blurb about it, but I'll go into a little bit more detail since we have a window. MyWorkDrive, the access point publicly is a website, right? You saw Rick use that demo.lampath.net in his client presentation. So you have to make that available. It's a website, and essentially it's hosting the web client, which you saw him start with, and it's hosting the API that the clients connect to. And you can make that available any way you want, essentially, as long as you're not using compression and you manage your WAF activities or security activities around those calls. So we have deployments with, Azure App Gateway, Azure Load Balancer, Nginx, HA Proxy, Kemp, NetScaler. So I'm just throwing out names here, and anyone who's using any of these products will immediately recognize them and say, oh, I can do it with that. Fortinet, FortiGate products. But essentially, you're publishing this to end users. So you can do it we don't dictate, right? If you go into a clustering scenario, one of the first things you'll hear us say when we talk about clustering is the fact that we don't give you a front end. And that's because we want to work within whatever your current infrastructure and environment do. So whatever front end you're currently using, MyWorkDrive just sits behind it, gets configured to run behind it, and just works. So again, another one we're happy to go into detail with on anybody in specifics, because how Kemp works is different from how NetScaler works, is different from how Azure App Gateway works. But that's a question I've gotten a couple times this week.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. So Claudio in the chat is asking if there are any plans to make the MyWorkDrive server into a deployable container.
We've talked a lot about that, and I think it really speaks to the environments we deploy into. And historically, containers, Docker type scenarios have not been really common in Windows, right? And our baseline has always been Windows installing on a Windows server, and that doesn't change in 7.1. I didn't mention that. We still install on a Windows server. As of version 7, it may or may not be domain joined anymore. Historically, we were domain joined. So the ability to do containerization is something we look at. It's something we do consider. We have no firm roadmap on that at this point, but it's definitely something that we are aware of as it grows in popularity in the Windows ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, Claudio does have a couple of follow-ups as well,
Sure.
Including running in a NAS, like a Synology NAS. What is the recommendation to share folders from a NAS from the network? And he is also asking about hybrid users who move in and out of the office. Is there any need to switch off the MyWorkDrive client?
The NAS is a really exciting question because historically we've always supported NASs as window file shares, right? You can connect to any NAS you want, from something like a NetApp on the expensive end, or something like Synology or TrueNAS on the lower end, right? Any NAS with a Windows file share works fine. But now with these additional drive connection products, S3, SFTP, we haven't talked about NFS, but we support NFS as well in that same model. So really, any way that your NAS presents a share, you could put that into MyWorkDrive and make that available for remote users. So you don't need to worry about opening SFTP on your firewall or trying to support the S3 protocol direct to your storage with some other product. You could just do it through MyWorkDrive. You can accomplish that single pane of glass, your traditional or historic Windows file shares, your migrated cloud storage, your OneDrive and SharePoint for users as you deploy that for in-office collaboration. So yeah, lots of options to make a NAS available. As far as like installing on a Synology in a container, we're not there yet, and I don't have an absolute answer to that. But like I say, the ability to do containerization is something we do keep our eye on as it grows in the Windows ecosystem. I think the second question was about hybrid users moving in and out of the office.
Yeah, and is there any concept of switching off the client?
Well, it's interesting because that is something we saw in the early days, where you would turn the client off when you got to the office and use a local connection, and you would then turn the client back on when you left the office. But now, as we add these other storage models where you're jumping between different cloud offerings, right? There is no map drive from an S3 endpoint unless you're coming through MyWorkDrive, right? Or SharePoint, right? So do you want users to have that single pane of glass, in which case MyWorkDrive is extremely popular in the office environment. And beyond that, on the concept of Windows file shares, you can get to a zero trust model where you're not giving the users direct access to the file shares over a network. You're forcing them to go through MyWorkDrive and layering those security options on. Right. So increasingly, we see people not wanting to turn the client off. But yes, there are absolutely methods that we use. There's no automated methods, right? There's no like MyWorkDrive recognizes by a geolocation that it's turning the client off or something like that. We haven't built that into the product. But there are absolutely ways to replicate that using our scripted controls, because I mentioned scripted installs. But you can also script starting and running the client from scripted controls. So that's a great scenario where if you haven't already engaged with support, you can drop that into support, and we can share with you some of those workflows we've seen over time around detecting the network connection that the user has joined, and script and uninstalling the client, or not uninstalling the client, but stopping the client rather, and then script running a logon script to map shares via the network.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Claudio has clarified that the question is because users typically already have map drives within their office network, which obviously MyWorkDrive has, takes into account.
Right. So yeah, so that's the point where I say you would absolutely, that's something I would handle with scripting and a detection of being in the office, either joining a network or connecting to a particular Wi-Fi name or something like that, and then running a script to stop MyWorkDrive and running a separate script, or as part of that script to mount those network shares, or just do a logon, right? So they get their shares and their printers and everything else.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have time for a final couple of questions. So this one's from Alex, who says that in the logs part of the MyWorkDrive server, log retention can be set, for example, 60 days, but the log viewer he can't see beyond 30 days. Where are these logs available anywhere else on the MyWorkDrive server?
So what I would assume in Alex's case is probably he adjusted from 30 to 60 and we haven't gotten to day 31 yet, because the view in the log viewer is always going to show you every file that's available on the file system. Now there's dates, and I should probably just share screen and pull this up so we can see it, not talk about it in abstract. Because the answer to the second part of that question is also yes. But essentially on the log viewer, you can go in here and adjust your dates. So you could pick an earlier date. Now, in the case of my server, I only have 30 days retention. So that's the point I was trying to make, which is you can put these dates to whatever you want, but if you haven't actually retained the data and it's already been purged, it won't help you until you get to, if I change it to 60 on my server today, I won't have anything for day 31 or 32 or 33 until into June, right? So that's it may be just this default search is what Alex needs to get into those other days. The other side of that question is, yes, those logs are stored on the file system, but they're not stored after they're purged, right? So if I did what I just described and I went in here to settings and I changed my log retention days, well, mine is actually already set to 90, so that search I just gave is a bad example. But if I went in and changed this to 120, obviously I wouldn't have that data because it's already been purged until it goes beyond. But yes, the logs are stored in our standard standard log path on the file system. Help desk can send you a link to that if you just pop them an email, and maybe if there's a further problem, we can do follow-up just direct to that. But yeah, both those answers are true, and we do have cases where customers will use the file system-based logs to move them out, store them at other locations.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott, and I hope that answers your question, Alex. So one final question before we end today's session. When will 7.1 be available in production?
Great. So we're in essentially our pre-release phase or our preview phase. We always do a preview phase to collect feedback from our customer base. We've gotten great feedback from our customer base. 7.1 feels like a very stable and solid release, and we're probably within the next 15 to 30 days to go into production with it. But if anyone is concerned about trying it, please try it. It's very stable. It's really ready to go. As you saw from anyone who's been around for any period of time, the list of new features is relatively short because we kept this to be a small release with just a lot of maintenance and updates and sort of future-looking functionality. So not a great deal of changes. Anyone who's concerned should definitely do it. And I suppose it's a good time to make the point of, everyone who's an existing customer should be aware, and of course anyone who's a prospect should be aware, where our licensing model is very flexible. We want you to be able to deploy a QA and test server so you can try this out. So your license, I guarantee everyone on this call, your license will support you activating a 7.1 server if you want to test and try it. And if you had any problems doing that, reach out to support and we will make it so for you, because we want you to be in a position to try it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Scott. And thank you everybody for attending and asking these great questions. If you have any further questions or if you'd like to get your hands on the latest release, please do so from our website or simply by contacting Scott and his support team or Rick and his sales team. So sales@myworkdrive.com for any sales questions or support@myworkdrive.com for any technical questions or deployment related questions. But this has been really great for us. I hope you guys found some value in what we presented today. And yes, if you're interested in anything else, do reach out, book a demo, and we can help you from there. But that's it from us today. So thank you so much for joining and see you next time.